John Nichols. Come on up, John.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nate Tim, best introduction ever. I gotta tell you, man, when they do those like 5-minute introductions that they took off Wikipedia that my mom wrote, I'm always, like it's about midway through, I'm like, I don't want to hear anything more about myself, and I'm sure the audience wants to hear less. But Nate Tim, brothers and sisters, in the great texts of our great religions, it is said, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness in the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore put on the whole armor of God, that in the evil day ye may stand. And when you have withstood, when you have done all, that ye may stand. Brothers and sisters, I'm not trying to lay religion on you this morning. I'm trying to describe Nate Tim. This man has stood through every battle, has organized again and again and again, has called us together in the darkest and most difficult times. Brothers and sisters, Nate Tim is a hero. All right. People often ask me, they say, because they can't focus on the moment. No one can ever focus on the moment. We are all children of this electronic age. We're always looking toward whatever comes next. So they say to me, who should be the candidate for president in 2020? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm busy impeaching Trump in 2018. But they say to me, who should be the president in 2020? And I think to myself, well, who should be? Who would it be? And it strikes me that, and I'll say this bluntly, I think it ought to be a working class individual. Yeah, it ought to be somebody who comes from a working class background. But it should not be some inexperienced person, because we tried that with Trump, it didn't work. There's got to be somebody who's served in state, local, and national government, who's really got some solid experience. All right? It ought to be somebody, in my view, who has a track record of opposing war and supporting economic and social justice. And that person ought to have done it from a position of authority where they had to risk something to do it. They should have been like a chair of a congressional caucus. And that person also ought to be from a community that hasn't always been invited into the corridors of power. I'd say maybe a woman, person of color, or a member of the LGBTQ community. And I keep thinking to myself, who would be a great candidate for president? And I'm always struck by the fact that it would be Mark Pocan, our own congressman. But should he pull his punch on that race, should he decide not to go big, I would be satisfied if after November of 2018, in a little bit of reshuffling and reorganizing, some of which Mark himself wouldn't even try to initiate, that he would be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. But on the chance that doesn't happen, we'll see him here next year. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Pocan, one of the greatest members of Congress, standing up for economic and social justice, standing up to Trump at every turn, fighting for peace in our Congress. Mark Pocan. He's going off now. He's going to go speak at the march that the kids are doing in Madison. We are very lucky to have him. So let me take a couple of moments here. Everything's been said, but not everybody has said it yet. My friend Matt Rothschild spoke well and wisely, as always. Great longtime editor of The Progressive, now doing great democracy work here in Wisconsin. So many good people here, and I'd be remiss if I didn't begin by noting that we are people of a place, this place, Wisconsin. But before we came here, there were people of this place. The European immigrants who settled here came to a place where human beings had lived for hundreds and thousands of years and had built a great culture, great history in this place. And I'm so honored always to be in the presence of my friend and my comrade in so many struggles for economic, social justice, and peace, and for equity, Art Shigoning. Now, Art's got so much history that he's using a walker now to carry it. But he is an epic figure, and we are so lucky to have him with us. I want to trace a little of our moment here because I think it's an important one. I know we've had people talk about Donald Trump and everything happening in Washington, and I respect that. I'll tell you very bluntly, I do favor, as an American and as a patriot, as the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson of somebody who fought in the Revolutionary War, people who were involved in framing the Constitution of this country and this state, peripherally, let me emphasize, who fought in most of our wars to make real the promises of liberty, that I believe Donald Trump should be impeached and removed from the office of President of the United States because he has violated the basic premises of the American experiment by opposing freedom of the press, freedom of speech, by attacking people in ways that a president should never attack them, by violating the Emoluments Clause, and by colluding with people who want to overwhelm our system with influence from outside rather than respecting the vote and the will of the people. So I think Donald Trump should be impeached. And frankly, I think the people who have sustained him should be removed from office in November, and that list begins with House Speaker Paul Ryan, who has served neither the people of his district, nor the people of this country, nor the Constitution that he swore an oath to uphold. But I don't want to talk about Washington. I want to talk about Wisconsin because I am a Wisconsinite. I love this place. I believe that Wisconsin is the greatest state in the country, and I will always believe that it is superior to all others, despite the occasional errors that we make. And boy, are we conscious of our occasional errors at this moment. Because this state has been battered for 8 years. 8 years by so-called leadership that does not represent the people of Wisconsin, but that, as Matt Rothschild so ably noted, represents out-of-state interests that come to this state to pillage it on behalf of their economic gain, not on behalf of the good of the people of this state. And those who would collaborate with those out-of-state interests, those who would accept those coins in order to barter off the promise of this place, we should call them what they are. They are sinners against the basic premises of the Wisconsin experiment, of the Wisconsin idea. They are wrong, and they do not belong in positions of power. When Scott Walker refuses to hold special elections to fill vacant legislative seats, that man is denying people the right to vote for their representatives. No one, no Democrat, no Republican, no Green, no Libertarian, no Independent, no Wisconsin progressive would ever have thought it was acceptable to refuse to hold elections because your miserable party might lose them. And at this point, what Scott Walker has done with these special elections is so wrong, so vile, so antithetical to democracy, that he says, oh, well, it would be inefficient to hold them. It's like, if we held them now, they'd be almost clashing up against the November election. And I say to him, if you had called the special elections on the day that those seats went open, those seats would be filled today, and 250,000 Wisconsinites would have the representation they deserve in our state legislature. Do not tell me that democracy is inconvenient and inexpensive. What is inconvenient and inexpensive is the denial of democracy by a governor who does not respect the will of the people. And I wish what he was doing with these legislative seats was the worst of it. Oh, but brothers and sisters, my ancestors came out of the tin mining hills of Cornwall. They came to this state in the 1820s and settled out in Mineral Point. They burrowed into the sides of those hills to mine lead to send off to Henry David Thoreau's family's pencil company out in Concord. They mined that lead and they weren't creative in the names of places. They called places Mineral Point and New Diggings. It was all about mining. And they did it because it was honorable, hard, and painful work. Of course, my people weren't as honorable as some of the others, so they quickly got out of it. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Abner Nichols, for whom a half block in Mineral Point is named. Abner Nichols went up to Madison as soon as the legislature moved up there because he had an ingenious idea. He knew that when politicians gathered, somebody'd want to have a drink. And so he opened a tavern right opposite the state capitol, where the Walgreens store is now located. I believe the tavern was the most honorable business to have been located there. And because of his excellent tavern operation, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Abner Nichols, became the territorial treasurer of Wisconsin. He was the treasurer of the territory, and his job then was to watch out over what the appointed governors and all the politicians did with our money. Because they thought even then, before this was a state, there ought to be a watchdog on the governors and the legislators and all those people. There ought to be an independent treasurer who says, hey, hold it, you're not supposed to be doing that with our money. My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Abner Nichols, he left that territorial treasurer's job, became a member of the first state legislature, representing Mineral Point in that area out there, and helped to craft many of the ideas that went into the first state constitution to support its passage. And in that first state constitution, we established constitutional offices because we didn't believe in monarchy. We didn't think that a governor should be elected and then be able to appoint everybody else. Every little sinecure should be filled by the governor's cronies and allies. So they created a governor. They created a independent lieutenant governor, not elected with the governor. He was an independent office. That's one of the great sins of our politics. We've aligned these offices. They created an independent attorney general. I wish we had one now. They created an independent state treasurer, and they created an independent state secretary of state. In the last 50 years, there's been an effort to diminish this constitutional governance in Wisconsin. They have attacked the 2-year term for governor. Governor should always be elected by 2-year terms, not 4. They attacked the 2-year term for governor because they wanted to give it more time to raise money, more power. They attacked the separation of the lieutenant governor's office. They wanted to attach it to the governor so it was an extension of the governor. They went to 4-year terms for all these other offices. And then they started attacking the Secretary of State, the state treasurer, the superintendent of public instruction. They started taking more and more power away from these positions. Each time they took power from these positions, they gave it to the governor's office. They allowed more and more power to concentrate in the governor's office so that somebody could come along from Kansas or Iowa, move to Wisconsin, get into politics, and then start to accumulate that power and then dole it out on behalf of their campaign donors from distant places. They have diminished the office of Secretary of State, State Treasurer, to such a point now, because of their own wrongdoing, that they say, oh, well, these offices are no longer necessary. Why don't we just eliminate them? And I promise you, when they get done with that, if they succeed, they'll say, this superintendent of public instruction, well, why do we have an independent? That shouldn't the governor run all the schools? And I do not doubt that they will do what happens in some other states like Maine. They'll say, well, if you have a governor, why shouldn't the governor appoint the attorney general? Why shouldn't we just have one election, elect a governor, and let him do everything he wants to do? Well, brothers and sisters, my ancestors didn't come to this state to make that kind of state. They came to this state to make a democracy out here in the middle of the country where power was shared and distributed amongst all the people. Now, I know we're going to vote on a lot of stuff on April 3rd. I've never asked you for anything. Except maybe impeach the president. But I've never asked you for anything, but this is my ask. In honor of my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Abner Nichols, who served as the territorial treasurer, I want you to go to the polls on April 3rd and say to Scott Walker and say to all his cronies, you don't get our office of state treasurer. We are going to vote to keep it. They're trying to take it away in a referendum on April 3rd. We need to say no, no, no. We want to keep our democracy in this state. And while you're at it, brothers and sisters, as long as you're there, I'm not going to tell you how to vote because this is a nonpartisan event. So I'm going to tell you there's a race for state Supreme Court. Now, there are two candidates on the ballot, and one candidate is aligned with Shirley Abramson and Walsh Bradley, and people who are actually good. And one candidate was the governor's lawyer when he was fighting against labor rights and voting rights and all sorts of other stuff, and then the governor appointed him to some judgeship out somewhere. Sauk County, which is a great place until this guy became a judge. And so I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'm just going to say that on April 3rd, when you go to that polling place, you're going to receive a ballot. And when you get that ballot, I would encourage you to vote for whoever's name rhymes with ballot. Now, we could go on and on about all sorts of stuff. We could talk about all the upcoming elections in the fall, and we should a little bit. But let me quickly, because my time here is just about done, let me quickly tell you that the most important issue in our politics is that we don't have politics anymore. The most important issue in our politics is that we have a manufactured process where money from distant places tells us what the issues are. And it narrows our discourse to such an extent that we don't have Medicare for all, single-payer health care. Not because people don't want it, but because the powers, the elites, the money doesn't want it. We don't have a good program for addressing climate change, not because people don't want it, but because powers that literally own fossil fuel companies come in and tell us, well, let's not address that. We don't have gender equity. We don't have the racial justice that we should. We don't have the LGBTQ promise fulfilled that should be fulfilled, that is that everyone is treated equally under law. We still haven't achieved all the things that we should achieve in this country because powerful interests are more interested in lining their pockets than in having rules and regulations that require that we treat women and people of color and members of the LGBTQ community and working class folks and farmers and everyone in this country equally. They're so interested in having some sort of fantasy that they get to write all the rules, that they don't let us to write the basic rules that we should. And brothers and sisters, money in politics is the essential sin against the promise of the American experiment. And so, I like your applause, but let me say this. On April 3rd, people will be voting in Rice Lake, Wittenberg, McFarland, Sun Prairie, La Crosse, Green County, and St. Croix County on referendums to say that money is not speech, corporations are not people, and we have a right to organize elections in which our votes matter more than their dollars. So brothers and sisters, I want you to be busy. on April 3rd. Busy in good works on April 3rd. I want you to go out there and vote as you should, not as I tell you. Vote for democracy. Vote to keep our constitutional governance with an elected state treasurer so that we can then restore powers to that office. Vote for a Supreme Court that puts justice ahead of the interests of the governor. Vote in your local elections to create a rising cry to our legislature and our Congress to get money out of politics. And then, I want you to sleep well on the night of April 3rd. And I want you to wake up that next morning after you have won and won and won again. But you're not tired of winning. That's the thing. They may get tired of winning, but we should never get tired of winning. I want you to turn around and start focusing on that November election. And I want you to understand and remember this simple fact. Scott Walker was elected on the basis of resentment. He said we should resent one another, right? You should be mad at some state employee who's got a pension or some overtime pay or some health care. That's how he got elected. He played that game very, very well. He put that into our water. I'm sorry, he polluted our water with it. Now he did this Foxconn thing. Now, Foxconn serves a small portion of the state and frankly may not even serve it well. Foxconn takes $4.5 billion of our tax money and gives it to a multinational corporation that is not headquartered here and never will be. Foxconn takes our water and gives it to this company to do as it chooses. Foxconn takes our environmental regulations and shreds them. Foxconn takes our labor rights and our labor protections and shreds them. This Foxconn deal is a corrupt deal designed to benefit powerful people and to enrich them, and they will perhaps create some jobs, and that is fine. But here's the bottom line. If Scott Walker says it should be about resentment, then I say this. Everybody in Wisconsin that isn't benefiting from Foxconn should vote for somebody other than Scott Walker for governor of Wisconsin in November of this year. And I'll close with this. The candidate I will support for governor, the candidate I endorse for governor, is the candidate who says this Foxconn deal was not made with transparency and openness. It was not made right. And we have a responsibility and a right to renegotiate it. And in that renegotiation, we will say to that Taiwanese company, we want you to be in Wisconsin. We're delighted for you to come to Wisconsin. And we want you to operate like every other Wisconsin corporation. We want you to respect our environmental laws. We want you to respect our labor laws. We want you to pay your taxes. We want you to give us $4.5 billion. We don't want to give you $4.5 billion. And brothers and sisters, when we recognize that we've got that extra $4.5 billion, then we can decide what we're going to do with it for the people of Wisconsin. And I say $1.5 billion for education so every child is educated all the way through college. $1.5 billion for health care so that no one is ever denied care because they don't have the money to pay for it. And $1.5 billion for the farmers and the small businesses of Wisconsin that were here before Foxconn and that will be here after it. I want to invest in the people of Wisconsin and its future, not some Taiwanese company. Solidarity.